Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Christine Casuis, President of the French-ANZ Chamber of Commerce of Western Australia, and it is my honor to open the following interview as part of our French-ANZ FATCI Business Week program. Before we start, I wish to acknowledge the Nyunga Whadjuk people, traditional custodians of the land. We wish to acknowledge the strengths of their continuing culture and offer our respect to elders, past and present. We would like to thank the French-ANZ Chamber of Commerce for the organization of this French-Australian-New Zealand Business Week, and particularly Jérôme Fournant and his team for delivering such a fantastic program. We would like also to thank our naming rights sponsor, the company Schneider. We would like to thank the French Embassy and Austrade for their support throughout the preparation of this Business Week. And today it is an honor to open this interview on Westport, a long-term sustainable growth project for WA, presented by Nicole Lockwood, Independent Chair Westport Task Force. And the question will be performed by Angie Berry, Senior Associate Projects, Infrastructure and Construction at Minter Ellison. Welcome, Nicole, and welcome, Angie.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Nicole, for coming to talk to FATCI members and friends today at our French-ANZ Business Day. We're really happy to have you and to welcome you as the guest speaker. The topic for the Business Days is shaping attractive cities, and we thought Westport fits perfectly with this theme for this year, so we're very excited to have you. So I'll launch right in. Westport is arguably WA's biggest project to date and described by the Premier as a once-in-a-lifetime project. Nicole, as independent chair of the Westport Task Force, you are the front face of the plan to manage WA's growing freight demands for the 50 years and beyond. Could you outline briefly for us the process undertaken to identify WA's best option to manage the growing freight demands?
Thank you so much, and I really appreciate the opportunity to be here and speak about the project. As you've indicated, it is a very broad-ranging project, and if you're thinking about shaping cities and building cities, I think COVID has really reinforced that freight is the connector. It's the thing that brings us all together, that allows us to live the lifestyles we like to live, and certainly enables our 21st century economy. So to be able to answer this question, we needed to look at the drivers around what freight is going to look like into the future, and that's very much about people and economic growth. So to be able to go on the journey, we needed to first step back and understand the trade forecasting. That relates also back to population growth and density targets, and making sure we understood all of the parts of the network. And the unique part of this project was the fact that we were given the whole network to review. So when you think about a port, you think about the operations of the ships moving in and out, but we have to move those goods through a supply chain to their end user. So the scope of the project was port, road, rail, and land, which enabled the distribution of goods. So in doing that, we first sort of stood back and understood the capability of the current freight network, what the capacity was of each of the parts of that network, and then understood the future growth scenarios, and then matched those together to understand where the constraint points were. It became pretty clear pretty quickly that the current facilities that we have at Fremantle have served us very well from their historic beginnings over 100 years ago through to now. But what we're going to need into the future is quite different, and the shape of Perth has changed significantly. So being able to think about different options from a location point of view, but also from a technology point of view and a movement perspective, we then started to look at 3 sites across Fremantle, Kwinana, and then Bunbury, and then a range of different road and rail options. And that took us through a process of multi-criteria assessment where we were able to understand each option, and we did 27 in the end, looking at different permutations to take us sort of through an exercise of understanding them from a triple bottom line point of view. So in terms of social, economic, and cultural significance, as well as social, economic, and environmental significance. Also built into that is cultural. So once we'd gone through that journey, we came down with a shortlist and now our recommendation.
So thanks, Nicole. That leads me into the Stage 2 report, which has just been released, and Kwinana industrial area has been recommended as a location to build the land-back port. So what do you see as the potential implications for both the city of Kwinana, and what do you think the impact will be of removing container trucks from Perth suburbs? So a double question for you.
Yeah, sure. So Kwinana, the city of Kwinana, actually was an advocate for this project even prior to the last election. So it's something that they've seen. You know, they already are home to our largest industrial estate in the metro area. They have an issue with unemployment as well that they're keen to solve. So they saw this project as a real enabler for their local community, but they also wanted to leverage off the back of what already exists. So huge support from that local community, and a lot of opportunities for leverage for other things that can come as a result. From a Fremantle perspective, again, you know, real connection to the port and its role in Fremantle, but I think taking a long-term view and understanding how we deal with the transport network differently, really good opportunity to allow Fremantle to actually grow and become a totally different type of environment, and part of that is about removing that heavy freight task. So there's still a mixed view around that from the residents of Fremantle. Certainly the broader network that surrounds Fremantle, I think, are quite pleased that will take that heavy task out of the inner urban area. Yeah,
and so opportunities for residential and commercial growth potentially for Fremantle, presumably.
Oh, huge opportunity in terms of what does Fremantle become as a result. So that the assumption is that cruise and visiting naval vessels and other things stay, and that it is still a port facility, but that off the back of that, as you've seen in other places around the world, and Barangaroo is probably the most recent, what can you turn that into? And huge opportunity to reimagine Fremantle's future.
Fantastic. And so that really leads into a question about determining the timetable for transitioning. So work is now going to proceed to determine the transition of freight from Fremantle to Kwinana. And what are some of the challenges or problems or issues that the task force has anticipated with the transition? Are you able to talk us through some of those challenges today?
Sure. So the timing really relates to a range of triggers, which are external to the port. So they relate to congestion and other things. And then at the other end, they relate to the size of ships and the trends that are coming there, and Fremantle's capacity to manage those. So part of the next stage of work is understanding the commercial implications of shifting a supply chain. There's a lot of infrastructure that supports the port that's not at the port. So one of the options is to split the task and take half in the first instance to Kwinana and allow Fremantle to grow again and then shift the whole, or the other is to take the whole in one step. And there's definitely quite a lot of intricacy and complexity around that move. So part of the process in the next stage will be working with industry to understand what the impact would be of trying to split the port in two, and what, you know, how they would support that, and what the cost impacts would be of that too, because there may be some cost impediments to having two ports. Or the flip is what would happen if we were to shift in one step. And again, from a transition point of view, how do we bring that port online? What is the timing and staging of a shift? How do we make sure that people don't get disadvantaged through the move? And commercially, how would that be set up to enable the market to participate?
Yeah, so there's still a lot of issues to work through there. It's very interesting to be involved in that. And so this is really, you know, a once-in-a-lifetime project, as it's been described, to propel long-term and sustainable growth. And part of that is to analyse the multi-dimensional effects on cities' interactions and how this can transform our state. And as you said, it's not only economically, but there's, you know, the social and the environmental considerations to consider. And so how do you think a project like Westport can change potentially the configuration of the social fabric of Perth and its surrounds?
I think a port in its purest form is a piece of infrastructure, but actually it's an enabler of a whole range of other outcomes. So, you know, at its heart, this is about trade, this is about growth of the population base, it's about livability and amenity. And then off the back of that, it's about economic development, which results in jobs and opportunities. So from a social perspective, firstly, if we have an efficient supply chain and a forward-thinking port, the cost of living is improved because we're keeping the costs down as much as we can. Speed of deliveries, making sure that we're moving things around as quick as we can, also, I suppose, impacts on what our social expectations of how we want to live these days and how we're trading globally and what that means from an end user perspective. But I think from an economic development and jobs point of view, this could be a huge catalyst for the state, and certainly looking at where it's going to be located in Kwinana, there's a massive opportunity there to leverage off the strength we already have in that industrial area and actually make it better than it is. And I was with the Kwinana Industries Council yesterday, and the businesses are really excited about the opportunities that come from building a facility like this that's future thinking, that then would translate into social and economic outcomes.
Absolutely. And one of the only completely new developments of this nature being undertaken probably globally at the moment. So how fortunate to be in a position to witness that. Now, the Westport's task force recommendations were reached after more than 2 years of work. Lots and lots of work has gone into the review, a review of past planning. You've looked at the history of the port, significant data collection, extensive consultation, collaboration with all types of stakeholders and members of the community, all tiers of government as well. But I guess you could never have imagined a pandemic arising on the horizon in 2020. And I wonder, has COVID-19 impacted the way you see the project?
Look, it's been a really interesting shock to the project, and I think a reinforcement of the importance of long-term planning, but also repeated and regular review of assumptions, because all of these projects are based around some parameters that we have no control over. And we've definitely seen that through COVID. So I think what it means for the project, I think what's been exciting is that the government has seen the importance of this project even in a pandemic. So they've made an announcement and committed to the next stage right in the thick of recovery planning. So they see it as an enabler of our future recovery, but also really understanding what these shocks mean, and that actually all they tend to mean is a shift in timing, because it's potentially caused a delay, and even that we can't yet determine. The trade growth, there was a slight dip over the last financial year because of the last part of the last quarter of the financial year, but already year on year we're seeing a 5% growth in containers on what we saw last year. So the population growth is probably the thing that's going to take a hit that may have an impact, and that's more from a triggers perspective around the congestion. But whether we need this port, what it's going to offer in terms of value, that still remains. And the work that will be done over the next 4 years will keep updating and reiterating that. So whatever the outcome of COVID, that will play into the final decision about when and how to shift.
So do you, in answering that, are you saying that your projections for future freight movement or container demand at Westport have not really been significantly impacted by COVID-19, or are you saying that you're still kind of waiting to see how that plays out?
Yeah, definitely. Look, one of the first pieces of work in the next stage is actually to review the trade forecast. The difficulty for all economists at the moment is nobody knows how to forecast with everything that's going on. So there's going to have to be a bit of I suppose guesswork in what comes next. But we've got a 10-year time frame in which we're saying that you'd want the facility up and running. So again, we keep going, and in a couple of years, again, you can have a reflection. This piece of work over the next 4 years takes us to the equivalent of a final investment decision. So the government would not yet have committed to progressing, and if in that time we realise there's a couple of years that have we've had a slowdown, then they've got an opportunity to just wait a little bit longer to start.
So, part of the driver for this whole project is to transition the freight from Fremantle to Kwinana due to the increasing road congestion. The drivers you talked about at the start of the interview, one that I read about in the report, which is really interesting to me, and that the conference touched on last year, was about the social licence to operate as well, which is quite interesting. Now, Do you think increasing road congestion, particularly as well due to COVID, less people are using public transport, which I think is quite an interesting one. Do you think that COVID-19 will result in Westport being moved up the priority list for government, or has it actually had the opposite effect? And maybe you can answer this question partly with your infrastructure WA hat on as well.
Yeah, sure. Look, my sense is it's probably galvanised the desire to move forward with large scale infrastructure projects, and part of that is about recovery. So I think if anything, it's brought it on. In terms of timing and when it's needed. There's so many things playing out at the moment. Initially, I was thinking, okay, we're going to have a downturn in trade, we're going to have a downturn in population, and we're going to have a downturn in congestion because people are working from home more. But as you've indicated, actually we're seeing the reverse, and we're seeing more people in cars. So there's quite a few trends that are yet to really, I suppose, cement in terms of what's going to happen. But certainly from a cementing Western Australia's place in the future, and seeing, I think, where we're so strong globally. Some of the benefit coming out of COVID is our isolation, is our strength of markets. Our port is critical to that. So making sure that all of that infrastructure is best in class is really important.
Particularly from the point of view of WA being, isolated, the port really becomes very significant when air travel has been stalled or taken such a hit. It becomes a very, very important from the point of view of being able to service the needs of the population, particularly. So
and I think to your point about social license, that's been an interesting one, because from a Freight Council perspective, we were doing some work around building a social license for freight, because prior to COVID, our view was, and we did some survey work that showed most people not even aware of how their goods get to them. It doesn't correlate. I think that COVID really brought freight to the fore. People realised, oh, hang on, if I want a delivery, hang on, the US is out, this is not happening, air's not working, and suddenly maybe I'm not so upset about a truck coming past my house because it's actually going to bring me the things that I've been waiting for. So again, I think really bringing the importance of freight to the table has been an important outcome of COVID.
Yeah, and do you feel that this, that communications in relation to the importance of freight or the conversation maybe has changed as a result of COVID?
Definitely, definitely. And there's a much greater awareness in the general community, which is really helpful.
So that has potentially, one of the upsides of COVID has been that it has actually moved forward so we've seen an uptake in an agility in terms of working, but maybe also an uptake in community awareness around the importance of freight. So a good, a positive comms from that point of view for the Westport project, which is probably good for, the community as a whole. And now the project is actually moving into stage 2B. We've seen that with the release of the recent report into this transition phase, which we talked about previously. And during this stage, you mentioned that you're going to be doing further investigations in relation to issues that were not closed out during stage 2. Are you able to talk us through some of those issues in a bit more detail?
Sure.
So what do you see as some of those transition issues?
So we developed, as part of the process, a risk register of all the key risks to the project. So a lot of those relate to environmental impact, to land impacts, to understanding issues like whether or not we need a breakwater, starting to get our heads around that transition question in terms of commercial impact. So this intermediate stage is really, firstly, re-establishing the team, because the team sort of takes a different turn. It's a different skill set required. It's being repositioned within the Department of Transport, new governance, different ministerial structure. So there's quite a lot of work being done at the moment to establish it in the right way, and that obviously takes time, recruiting the right skills, but then also starting to work our way through these questions of uncertainty, to be able to, I suppose, eliminate some of those things to make sure that the work that's done as part of the design and the environmental approval is focused around the right outcomes. So, yeah, all of that sort of kicking off at the moment in terms of procurement and starting to think about bringing skills to the table.
And you mentioned a big piece will be the environmental approvals and the long-term environmental impact of the port. So there's quite a bit of work going on in terms of shaping the city, you know, fitting in with our theme about environmental sustainability. Are you able to talk just a little bit to that? So what's the work that's being done in relation to environmental sustainability for the project, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, no, definitely. So there's $97.7 million allocated over the 4 years, and over 25 million of that is for the environment. So it's a significant part of the program. The philosophy behind the project has always been that this has to be the most environmentally sustainable and least impact to be able to get both environmental approval and social license to progress. So the work really sits around quite a different approach around, well, firstly, cumulative impact assessment. So understanding the whole of Cockburn Sound, not just the footprint of the port. Doing some early work in the first couple of years to build resilience and to start to invest in ecosystems, to look at restoring seagrass, to understand the baseline characteristics. So there's a lot of monitoring work to be done and filling of scientific gaps, so that we make sure that when the impact starts to happen, that there's a really good foundation from which to understand how that's affecting the whole area. And to do that, we're going to need a very broad and well-equipped research community to do that. So we're in conversations at the moment with the WA Marine Science Institute to help us deliver this part of the program. Inherent in that is also the social part of the equation, because a lot of the environmental values actually relate to social impact and values. So around boating, fishing, you know, use of the area in terms of beaches and others. So there's a number of key groups like Wreckfish West, like the Boating Cockburn Powerboats Association, Boating WA, a number of other fishing clubs in the area that we'll be working with, as well as some terrestrial, to be able to make sure that when we do this, we're actually engaging the community and we're building environmental stewardship as part of the process. So it's quite a different approach, hence the size of the budget and the scale of the program.
Yeah, how fantastic. I'm really, pleased to hear about the environmental sustainability aspect of it. And I think that will play into certainly the social license to operate, which is a big consideration, I think, for the community. And it's very much on everyone's minds, shaping, the future of our cities. So it's been really interesting to hear all about the project and all the different drivers and the work that's still to be done. And I'm interested just to ask you a question in relation to the long-term impact. So for us at Minter Ellison, we've recently gone through a journey as a firm of discovering what our purpose is. And our purpose is to create lasting impacts with our clients, our people, and our communities. And that cuts across all of the work that we do. So when we're making any decisions, whether it be from the paper that we source or the clients that we work with, that cuts across all that we do. And you touched upon the long-term impact of the project as well. Could you share with us some closing remarks on what, in your view, could be the lasting impact for Westport and the project? As part, obviously, of shaping an attractive city. It's a very long question, I realise.
No, that's fine.
Look,
I think back to where we were discussing COVID and what it's brought to light. I think we've realised, well, a number of people I've spoken to have realised that WA is quite a unique place. It has a lot of strengths intellectually and environmentally and from a resource perspective. And this port is an opportunity to showcase a totally different way of working. Where it's located in Kwinana is the hub of global best practice in industry symbiosis. So it's the most interactions between industry groups in a geographical area anywhere in the world. We've got an opportunity, as you said, we're probably certainly the only Western location that's building a new port. We've got the ability to imagine the future and prepare for what technology and some of this new thinking is going to offer us, and really bring the best of what WA has to offer and leverage off this new investment, because it's a significant investment and will enable a number of other companies to do other things, to really be I suppose, a vortex of opportunity and of new ideas to really put WA on the map. And I firmly believe that we have all the ingredients. The thing we're missing at the moment is the connections. So there's also an opportunity for Westport to bring people to the table to make those connections. But I think, to industry, it's their chance to really start to look at, well, where do we play globally? How can we be best in class? And what does that mean then for our state as a, what's our vision in terms of what do we want to be known for in the rest of the world? And I think, really being part of the future of sustainability, best practice, using technology, using innovation, that's where this port, to me, is a catalyst for change.
How fantastic, what a fantastic project to be involved with. And I can see you're so passionate about it. And I think, they're lucky to have somebody as dynamic as you, obviously, on the task force. How wonderful to have you. Thank you so much for sharing your time and your insights and thoughts with us today, Nicole. It's very generous of you. And also thanks to the French-Australian Chamber of Commerce for the opportunity for me to interview you. I've really enjoyed it, so thank you. And I'm sure everyone on the webinar will agree this has been a really engaging discussion as part of the Shaping Attractive Cities French-Australian Business Days this week. So thanks once again, and good luck with the rest of the future project. I'll be following closely for my part. Thanks very much, Nicole.
So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you to Nicole Lockwood from Westport for giving us a great insight into one of our largest projects in our state, which will positively shape our cities in Western Australia. Thank you to Angie Berry from Inter Ellison for leading the questions. And to our audience, we look forward to seeing you all part of our exciting French-ANZ Business Week program. Thank you to all. Goodbye.